Okay, so I have a number of indications. Deputy McConalogue would normally come first. I was just wondering, would you be okay if I brought in Senator Moran first as the rapporteur on this occasion, and then go straight to yourself then?
Thanks very much. Thank you. I'd just like to begin by thanking the committee for facilitating the discussion today, which will feed into the report on the role of the special needs assistant, which I have undertaken as rapporteur. I'd like to welcome Impact to the National Parents Council Primary, representatives from the Department of Education and Skills and the NCSE. Since taking over as rapporteur for the committee report on the role of the SNA, I've undertaken a wide consultation with educational stakeholders on this matter. I've met with many groups, individuals, held a public meeting in addition to the previous ones for SNAs, and conducted an online survey where I received over 2,500 SNA comments and responses back, and I certainly have a lot to say on how this will feed into it. The representatives and groups here today met with the committee a year and a half ago now to discuss this matter. Your contributions have been noted, and I requested this meeting in order for the groups and representatives to provide any further thoughts or observations. So, as I said, since I've taken over this role in recent months, I've had the pleasure of speaking with many special needs assistants, and the one thing that comes through, and I think it's reflected, and everybody will agree, is the dedication and the passion that they have for their jobs. I know that on one of the nights when I had a meeting, it was freezing cold, lashing rain. Some of them had travelled from Dublin, and I know I was really grateful for them to come out on their own free time, and I think that's probably the first point that I want to get through, is how much of the work of the SNA is done on their own bat, without a lot of the time without any credit, I'd say, or acknowledgement of it. And I think they are, one of the other things that came out is that they themselves are also very anxious to have the role better defined, I would say, more clearly defined, and it is something that's evolving. The special needs assistants are widely recognised as being crucial in providing accessibility to mainstream education for children with additional needs, and at times provide the support necessary for some children to even attend school at all. Clearly, they have a significant effect on the schools they work in and on our educational system as a whole. Much of my reading, discussing and first-hand experience confirms that the role of the SNA has expanded beyond the Department of Education and Skills circular outlining that role. In order to best support the child and to provide the appropriate employment and expectations for the SNA, we need to work together to strike the right balance. And we cannot continue to ignore the reality which no longer matches the policy. I have a number of questions for the panel today, and I'm not too sure how much time I have now. If I could start, or is
I'll come back in the supplement. Maybe if you just give, say, 3 questions or something.
Okay. So I suppose the first one that's here, and the first thing that I would like to take up is, and I think it feeds into everybody's submission that has been made today, is the fact on training. I think there is a huge need, and it's something that I'm seeing back all the time. If we look at to go bring it back really back down. At the moment, what's required to be an SNA is 3 passes, 3 grade Ds in a junior cert. Now, we have that, and then just listening to the Department of Education, what the role is in the circular. And it includes catheterisation, it assists assistance with toileting or care needs, giving medication. And I know from some of the responses that I've got, including EpiPens, the use of EpiPens, dealing with that. And there is absolutely no training. Specific standardised training for this, and I was alarmed on some of the reports, on some of the responses that I got, where one person is saying they are actively engaged in catheterisation at the moment, and if something goes wrong there, what comeback have they got? What is there? What training has been there? Now, as I said, the basic qualifications that are there are 3 grade Ds. Looking at the list of the thousands of reports that have come in, the qualifications of SNAs at the moment are way beyond that. In a lot of cases, the SNAs are actually more qualified than the teachers themselves in a lot. With masters, I've had one that came back with a PhD, a lot of them in masters in childcare, nurses, people with degrees in intellectual disability, who really are qualified to know what's going on there. More often, and I'm saying this with personal experience, more often, and I will stand over it, than the teacher who has come out of college with no experience anywhere else, first job, and I think there's another where we don't want to go off topic, but where the role of the SNA, we need to look maybe at the role of the teacher who is teaching and the qualifications and the standards that's there for that. I have loads, but if I could just bring up that point is the first one, is on training. So I think we definitely need a statement of priority, a clear thing on the SNA. The other thing, if I could just take up Teresa's point on parental involvement, and again here I'm going to publicly state my vested interest as a person, as a parent of a child with special needs. I couldn't agree with you more. Very often parents have no idea what the role of the SNA is, and as you say, the person is taken from them and they see that as a perceived cut. I really think, great that you have leaflets coming out, but I think we need to get it into schools. There should be more contact between the parents, the principals, the teachers and the parent. I've gone in for IEPs every single year. I never meet the SNA. The SNA is never involved in it, and I think, okay, we need to get that. I leave it there and come back.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay, so Deputy McConalogue.
Yeah, thank you, Chairperson, and I'd like to welcome our guests here and also commend Senator Hayden or Senator Moran for her work as the rapporteur on behalf of the committee on this issue. I suppose our three of our guests, accepting impact, are very much of the position that the SNA current role should remain what it is. And I might just ask, and there's been research referred to in relation to that backs that up. Is there any research which contradicts that in any way, or is there any organisations or any internationally any evidence for teaching assistants role or SNA stroke teaching assistant positions? And I might ask Impact as well if they could comment further in relation to their views in relation to the development and expansion of the role and Impact's position in relation to that. Also, in relation to the current number of SNAs and applications in particular, I'd ask maybe if Ms Griffin could outline to us the development in terms of the numbers of applications for SNAs in recent years, and also the reason for the delay this year in actually informing schools of the number of SNAs that the school will have. I understand that it normally is done in the middle of June, and also if you confirm what number of SNAs may at this stage you expect to need in order to meet the demand which you feel, having assessed the applications you've received. Chairperson.
Okay, Deputy O'Brien.
Thank you. Again, just to thank all of the witnesses and also to pay tribute to Senator Moran for the role that she's undertaken as rapporteur. Just a couple of quick questions. One to the NCSE, just in relation to the 3,000 refused applications. Do you have numbers on how many of those 3,000 would have previously had access to an SNA? And how many of those 3,000 refusals were appealed and were successful on appeal? And how many would have been referred to the Ombudsman for Children and been successful on appeal? And I don't know if you have the figures with you, but you can provide them at a later date, because I would be interested in knowing those figures. Regarding, I think most people are in agreement that the SNA goes beyond the role as defined currently by the circular. And if that's the case, and it's not the role of the SNA because they're providing additional resources, or they're doing work that goes beyond their role, and if it's not the role of the teacher, then whose role is it to pick up that? That would be the other question. In relation to Impact, You mentioned in your contribution that the increase in...
Phone, would it be phone nearby?
No, my phone is off.
Yeah.
In relation to the increases of the SNAs, it doesn't make up for lost ground. Do you have a figure yourself that you think would have to be increased in order to make up for the lost ground, given the growing demographic and student numbers that are entering? And can I also ask you just for your opinion on the proposal or the idea of teaching assist? And finally, the issue of job bridge to employ SNAs, just your own opinion on that. The National Parents Council, the pair support...
Sorry, there is some interference there from something, so I suppose if anybody has anything, maybe, you know, just to relate. Yeah, your phone is off, yeah. It might be another phone you see in the vicinity.
The issue of the peer support, I wonder if you could expand on that, because one of the things that I have noticed when I speak to principals, when I speak to board of managements, or when I speak to parents of people with special educational needs, like take for instance somebody who may have dyslexia or dyspraxia, may have Asperger's, or may even have all three. There would be probably a consensus from some parents that they don't want to have a full-time SNA attached to that student because of the reasons you outlined in terms of, you know, difficulties trying to explain it to other classmates because it wouldn't be seen as, you know, appropriate. It's a learning difficulty, but obviously if we have dyspraxia or Asperger's, then there would be issues around toileting. So I can understand the peer support programme, and I'm just wondering how that would work, because there is no doubt that there are students, in my opinion, who need access to an SNA, but may not necessarily need a full-time SNA, and I'm just wondering how we can balance that. And the final question I would have is in relation to the department. Can you give us an update on the NCSE resource allocation pilot scheme, if you can? How many schools are involved in it? Do we have any cost on administering the SNAs in accordance with that scheme? And do you also have an opinion on the issue of NEPs? There is not a full allocation of NEPs, and I think that is something that needs to be addressed, because obviously that ties in with the whole issue.
Senator Darcy.
Maigata Cahirley, and I would like to thank the various bodies for their submissions, and in particular Senator Moran for in her role as rapporteur on this very important issue. First thing I would want to ask is the National Parents Council primary, and you refer to the over-dependence on SNA support can lead to social isolation, and that it, well, one of the aims of any good teacher should be to make themselves redundant so that the children disgrace them with the knowledge that they have. And the same could apply to an SNA, where really, you know, a parent should be very happy at the end of the day, if everything is fine, that their child no longer needs an SNA in the school situation. And we have to focus on that as well. That should not be used as an excuse for taking away the SNA. But nevertheless, it's a very good point which we should always remember. And one of the roles of the NCSE would be to monitor that, and the Department of Education. I'm interested also in the idea of peer support for pupils with needs, special needs in relation to SNA support. But does that contradict the assertion in the submission that it's a highly specialised thing, SNA support? So we have to or what type of peer support is that? It's a good idea, and it can happen, but what are the limits and tolerances and avenues for that support? Where would it? In relation to the impact, I think that we can look and say that the SNA role is developing in schools, and it's reached a maturation, I would say. But I don't wish to be too critical. I don't know whether it's fair to say that the SNA is treated as a dog's body in the school, and I think that's very hard on the teachers, because it's obviously hitting at the teachers, and in particular the principals. And I would just like to know how, in what way, what empirical evidence is there, and what industrial relations mechanism has this been negotiated and discussed with people like the Irish Primary Principals Network and other organisations that teachers are treating SNAs like dogs' bodies in a school? As a school principal for many years who worked with SNAs, I find that very hurtful, and I don't find it very true. And I would ask that be explained to me. And I was also disappointed in the impact submission that it never mentioned the children at all in any terms of the role of the SNA. And I think that if Impact has a problem with the INTO or any other group, it should bring it to the Irish Congress of Trade Unions or some that their fellow workers are treating other workers like dogs' bodies.
Okay, Deputy or Senator. The next is Senator or Deputy Daly.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I'd like to welcome the witnesses here this afternoon and thank them for their time, and also to thank Senator Moran for the focus that she has brought on this very, very relevant and important issue, and it's clear from her contribution that she has a lot of the background work done to it, and I would genuinely, very heartily welcome the focus of this committee on the issue of the role of the SNA. It's been a passion of mine for all my professional life, in whatever form I was, be it a parent or be it a politician or be it a former principal. Special needs education has always mattered to me dearly, so I genuinely very welcome the opportunity and the focus we're bringing it today. I think I want to begin by commending Ms Lynch. I think she probably summed up my own feeling on this issue for quite some time, because I spent a lot of my life as a principal and as a teacher, as a classroom teacher, trying to, I suppose, advise parents that sometimes less is more when it comes to resources, and it's not a numbers game, particularly with special needs learning. And I think you hit the nail on the head when you said sometimes parents will fight for any resource versus a fight for the right resource. And I think you kind of nailed it in that from my experience and my perspective, because there are good SNAs and there are not so good SNAs. There are good teachers, there's not so good teachers. I used to see children go out to resource teachers for 20 minutes or a half an hour of the school day. And if you have a good resource teacher, it's great for the child and it's great for everybody. But if you have a not so good resource teacher, and they exist as well, then that child wasn't going to be of much benefit, and in fact was losing a lot of what was going on in the classroom, from both a social context, from an academic context, and from a kind of a general overview of what's happening in the room. So I think we have to be careful not to get too tied up on numbers. While resources are important, the numbers isn't the bottom line. This isn't like a maths academy. Special needs learning is much more complicated than that. And I think it's really, really crucial that the role of the SNA is brought to the fore in any discussion. Because there are lots of SNAs, and let's call a spade, they're quite unhelpful, and parents are beginning to realise this more and more. If the SNA is doing the homework for the child, or is doing this for the child and sees that as their role, well, that's very destructive for the child's learning. And it takes a good awareness on everybody's part to ensure that people are very, very clear on the role of the SNA, and that they're not crossing that line where they actually become the enabler of the child not participating, not learning, and in actual fact could lend to be a destructive force rather than a productive force. So I cannot stress enough the importance of the discussion we're having here today. And a couple of issues I'd like to write. And by the way, the issue I took with Mr. Robinson's contribution was, I think you missed the point of this meeting, whether it was, I don't know whether it's our fault as a committee that we didn't advise you appropriately, but I would have preferred to hear the union bring to bear some of the feedback from their members who are SNAs on the ground and who have frustrations with the role, and their experience of the role, their understanding of the role, and their desire for clarification of the role. That's what I was hoping from your presentation, not a particular party political broadcast, as I felt it was on behalf of the Impact Union. Going back to a few questions, I just want to ask, I think one of my biggest fears and challenges at the moment is the whole transition from primary to secondary school. And it's something that hasn't been addressed here, and I'd like to ask any of the witnesses who have a contribution to make on that, particularly the department, and I suppose Teresa Griffin as well, just where we are, because I feel primary school is fairly well advanced and has come on in leaps and bounds in the whole area of special needs provision. In fact, I'd be very, very proud of the services that are available at primary school, but I have huge concerns about the level of and the transition to at second level. So I'd be particularly interested to hear what your views are on that. I think the other key, and I think it was Ms. Griffin spoke about, the role not being understood by parents. And I appreciate you've presented a leaflet there that I look forward to getting in a while. But I mean, we are 20 years into the journey of SNAs, I imagine. I'm not sure, but I'm guessing to 20 years, but there was SNAs there. And are we really 20 years still trying to get that across to parents, and have we taken our eye off the ball? This isn't about blame, but I'm just wondering why we're still 20 years on, that this is such an issue still that parents don't get to understand the role, because that's a huge part of it, is the parents feeling more is more, and I need numbers, and I need a full-time SNA, and I need a full-time resource, or 12 hours resource, or 10 hours resource, and all of that. So it is the key to it. And as long as that, I call it ignorance, but I don't mean to sound dismissive, but as long as that lack of awareness, say, on the part of parents is not there, and they don't understand fully the benefit and the impact of these resources on their child's education, then we're all losing the battle. So I think that's a key area. So I welcome the leaflet, but I'm just wondering, 20 years on, have we made enough over the year? The other thing, the IEP and the SNA's role, and I raised this with the Minister by parliamentary question very recently. A lot of parents, and I recently met with parents of autism, of children with autism down in West Cork, the West Cork Autism Parents Association, and they were querying with me the whole issue that they were all at a loss to see why the SNA was not at the meeting for the preparation of the IEP, which I find extraordinary. And that apparently is widespread practice, that the SNA is not present in the room when the group of people who best know the child and deal with the child prepare an individual education plan. So that would cause me great concern, and there seemed to be universality among the parents I spoke that their SNA was not there, and they all understood that the SNA was not allowed to attend. So I think that's something we just need to keep an eye on. And I appreciate your time. I'll be very, very brief. I think that's it. Again, just the transition to second level as well, if we can address that as well.
Okay,
thank you, Chair.
Deputy Harrington.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman. Again, to thank the witnesses for the presentations and the submissions. Again, to acknowledge the role of Senator Mary Moran as rapporteur in bringing this issue ahead. And just one observation before I have a few questions. I don't have any teaching experience like many of the committee members here, but I have to say that the submissions that I've heard and the presentations that I've read are an eye-opener for somebody who would be regarded maybe as a layperson in terms, I'm a parent, but would have had assumptions built up about exactly as maybe Deputy Daly and others would have said, more, you'd fight for more hours or more care or more SNAs as a parent, and without really digging into the, what are you getting for the resources that are allocated. So with that then, I would ask maybe a couple of questions. Since the circular was issued, is there any feedback on how the SNAs are allocated in terms of, is the situation generally seen as improving? Since the circular was issued, is the situation generally spoken about as being sufficient, or could there be extra work done to build on that circular 3014? Has any exercise been undertaken, again, as somebody that wouldn't have been familiar with this, has there any exercise been undertaken as to what happens in other jurisdictions with regard to needs assistance in primary schools, particularly in a situation similar to Ireland's educational system? And was there any debate or discussion with respect to the possibility of allocating needs assistance maybe to preschool children, with a view to, as the child progresses then onto primary school, that maybe preschool work would mitigate against further SNA allocations through the primary school network? Thanks, Chair.
Or Senator Cockrell?
Thanks very much, Claire. Look, I'd like to welcome the witnesses here as well, and indeed to thank Senator Moran for her work in bringing this issue before us. As I start, I'm going to have to apologise because I won't be here to hear the answers, but I will look up the answers later on because I have another meeting to go to. But from my perspective, I would like to start off with the Department of Education and Skills. And Senator Moran already drew attention to the qualifications required to become a special needs assistant. And I wonder what plans you have in place to assist the professionalisation of the role, if you want, to assist those that are already in it to acquire in-service training that would allow their skills to be brought up to a level that would allow them to be recognised as professionals, not a sort of a glorified childminder, which is sometimes the way they're looked upon. I wonder what plans there are in place, and this goes right across the entire group of witnesses there. I believe that when a child with special needs comes to a school at any level, whether it's a national school or whether it's second level school or beyond, that there should be a briefing session for the parents, the child and the special needs assistant all at the one time, and has time been allocated at the start of the school year to allow the teacher, the class teacher, to carry out that briefing session, so as everybody is on the same hymn sheet with respect to the role of the special needs assistant. So that the other one that where there's a child with special needs, I believe that there is a need for regular and ongoing meetings, and I know that classroom teachers do that by a sort of osmosis almost. They do it on an informal basis, but the formalisation of that is something that I think needs to take place, because there is a time when you may be able to, as my colleague Senator Darcy said a while ago there, success is when you're able to withdraw the special needs assistant and the child can stand on their own. And are we allowing a situation to develop where a child is allocated a special needs assistant even after the time they require it, where they have settled into the system, if you want? I'd like to specifically put a few questions to impact, if I may, and one of the things that concerns me, we're talking about the role of the special needs assistant, and there's been some criticism of your presentation here, and I'm not going to engage in that, but what I would like to know is that my role is impacted by the way in which I'm treated. That's my belief, and it has always been my belief. And I wonder how the employment conditions have affected the role of the special needs assistant. Well, I think in fairness, Chair, we talk here about the role having moved into behavioural, therapeutical, pedagogical, teaching and administrative roles. If those things are happening.
For any topic we have here, we could have discussions about.
Well, I think in fairness to impact, they should be allowed to address those issues.
Paddington Road. I mean, that's not our brief, you know. I mean, you've mentioned it, but it's not like we're going to stick to the topic.
Well, okay, but I do think if it impacts on the role, they should be allowed to address it. I also think one of the questions I would have for you is the area of in-service training. Do the union engage in in-service training, or is there a programme in place for in-service training for those? And the final one is the impact of the role, and I'm specific here now on the role of the special needs assistant if I'm being moved around the place, a couple of hours here and a couple of hours there, this fragmentation that has taken place. We used to have a situation where a special needs assistant was assigned to a child. We now have a situation where, and I want to know it clearly, is it funding that has caused a situation where we're now allocating hours rather than a full-time assistant. So I'm sorry, Chair, I won't have time to wait for the answer, but I will review the answers as soon as I possibly can. And I want to thank the members of the committee, and please forgive me, I have another meeting to go to. So thank you very much.
All right.